This is the one and only, the one you've been waiting for, Worfpoe, Michael Hemmingson, for Worfpoe's Sunday afternoon story time. I figured why not? I'll keep it up. So I'm thinking here to do a flying saucer theme. And the first one is a classic by Theodore Sturgeon called A Saucer of Loneliness, which I believe was published in 1957 or 50, no, actually 1955 maybe, in Galaxy magazine. I know the Outer Limits, the older Outer Limits, I mean the newer Outer Limits, the ones that were done in the 80s, had done a version of this story, which I didn't think was all that good. Well, anyway, Theodore Sturgeon, of course, classic science fiction author. He was the model for Kurt Vonnegut's alter ego in his books, Kilgore Trout. You know, get it? Theodore Sturgeon, Kilgore Trout. And then I have one of my own flying saucers sort of thing stories. And depending on the time, I've got a booklet Sean David Martin published in 2002 when he was doing his spiritual remote viewing workshops, and there's a chapter on time. Actually, there's some meditation. I don't know. We'll see how we're going. Maybe I'll just go back to. Oh, I don't know. Actually, yeah, I've got a time. You know what? I'm just gonna wing it. Hey, I'm gonna wing it. A Saucer of Loneliness by Theodore Sturgeon, classic from the 1950s, pulp era. 1950s. A Saucer of Loneliness. If she's dead, I thought, I'll never find her in this white flood of moonlight on the white sea, with the surf seething in and over the pale, pale sand like a great shampoo. Almost always suicides who stab themselves or shoot themselves in the heart carefully bare their chests. The same strange impulse generally makes the sea suicide go naked. A little earlier, I thought, or later, and there would be shadows for the dunes and the breathing toss of the foam. Now the only real shadow is mine, a tiny thing just under me, but black enough to feed the blackness of the shadow of a blimp. A little earlier, I thought, and I might have seen her plodding up the silver shore, seeking a place lonely enough to die in. A little later, and my legs would rebel against this shuffling trot through sand, the maddening Sam that could not hold and would not help a hurrying man. My legs did give way then, and I knelt suddenly, sobbing, not for her, not yet, just for air. There was such a rush about me, wing and tangled spray and colors upon colors and shades of colors that were not colors at all, but shifts of white and silver. If light like that were sound, it would sound like the sea on sand, and if my ears were eyes, they would see such a light. I crouched there, gasping in the swirl of it, and the flood struck me shallow and swift, turning up and outward like flower petals, where it touched my knees, then soaking me to the waist in its bubble and crash. I pressed my knuckles to my eyes so they would open again. The sea on my lips with the taste of tears, and the whole white night shouted and wept aloud. And there she was. Her white shoulders were taller, a taller curve in the sloping foam. She must have sensed me. Perhaps I yelled, for she turned and saw me kneeling there. She put her fists to her temples, and her face twisted. And she uttered a piercing wail of despair and fury, and then plunged seaward and sank. I kicked off my shoes and ran into the breakers, shouting, hunting, grasping at flashes of white that turned to sea salt and coldness in my fingers. I plunged right past her, and her body struck my side as a wave whipped my face and tumbled both of us. I grasped in solid water, opened my eyes beneath the surface, and saw a greenish-white distorted moon hurtle as I spun. Then there was sucking sand under my feet again, and my left hand was tangled in her hair. The receding wave towed her away, and for a moment she streamed out from my hand like steam from a whistle. In that moment I was sure she was dead, but as she settled to the sand, she fought and scrambled to her feet. She hit my ear, wet, hard, and a huge pointed pain lanced into my head. She pulled, she lunged away from me, and all the while my hand was caught in her hair. I couldn't have freed her if I wanted to. She spun to me with the next wave, battered and clawed at me, and we went into deeper water. Don't, I can't swim, I shouted, and she clawed at me again. Leave me alone, she shrieked. Oh, dear God, why can't you leave? Said her fingernails. Me, said her snapping teeth. Alone, said her small, hard fist. So by her hair I pulled her head down tight to her white shoulder, and with the edge of my free hand I hit her neck twice. She floated again, and I brought her ashore. I carried her to where a dune was between us, and the sea's broad, noisy tongue, and the wind was above us somewhere. But the light was not as bright. But the light was as bright. I rubbed her wrist and stroked her face and said, "It's all right," and there, and some names I used to have for a dream I had long, long before I had ever heard of her. She lay still on her back, with the breath hissing between her teeth, with her lips in a smile which her twisted, tight, wrinkled, sealed eyes made not a smile but a torture. She was well unconscious for many moments, and still her breath hissed, and her closed eyes twisted. "Why couldn't you leave me alone?" she asked at last. She opened her eyes and looked at me. She had so much misery there that there was no room for fear. She shut her eyes again and said, "You know who I am." "I know," I said. She began to cry. I waited, and when she stopped crying there were shadows among the dunes. A long time. She said, "You don't know who I am. Nobody knows who I am." I said, "It was in all the papers." "That!" She opened her eyes slowly, and her gaze traveled over my face. My shoulders stopped at my mouth, touched my eyes for the briefest second. She curled her lips and turned away her head. "Nobody knows who I am." I waited for her to move or speak, and finally I said, "Tell me." "Who are you?" she asked, her head still turned away. "Oh, someone who—" "Well?" "Not now," I said. "Later, maybe." She sat up suddenly and tried to hide herself. "Where are my clothes?" "I didn't see them." "Oh," she said. "Oh, I remember. I put them down and kicked sand over them, just where a dune would come, and smooth them over, hide them as if they never were. I hate sand. I wanted to drown in the sand, but it wouldn't let me." "You mustn't look at me," she shouted. "I hate to have you looking at me." She threw her head from side to side, seeking. "I can't stay here like this. What can I do? Where can I go?" "Here," I said. She let me help her up and then snatched her hand away, half turned from me. "Don't touch me! Get away from me!" "Here," I said again, and walked down the dune where it curved in the moonlight, tipped back into the wind and down, and became not dune, but beach. "Here," I pointed behind the dune. At last she followed me. She peered over the dune where it was chest high and again where it was knee high. "Back there?" She nodded. I didn't see them. So dark. She stepped over the low dune and into the aching black of those moon shadows. She moved away cautiously, feeling tenderly with her feet back to where the dune was higher. She sank down into the blackness and disappeared there. I sat on the sand in the light. "Stay away from me," she spat. I rose and stepped back. Invisible in the shadows, she breathed, "Don't go away." I waited, then saw her hand pressed out of the clean-cut shadows. "There," she said, "over there in the dark. Just be a... Stay away from me now. Just be a voice." I did as she asked, and sat in the shadows, perhaps 6 feet away from her. She told me about it. Not the way it was in the newspapers. She was perhaps 17 when it happened. She was in Central Park in New York. It was too warm for such an early spring day, and the hammered brown slops had a dusting of green of precisely the consistency of that morning's hoarfrost on the rocks. But the frost was gone, and the grass was brave and tempted some hundreds of pairs of feet from the asphalt and concrete to tread on it. Hers were among them. The sprouting soil was a surprise to her feet, and the air was in her lungs. Her feet ceased to be shoes as she walked. Her body was consciously more than clothes. It was the only kind of day which in itself can make a city-bred person raise his eyes. So she did. For a moment she felt separated from the life she lived, in which there was no fragrance, no silence, in which nothing ever quite fit, nor was quite filled. In that moment she ordered disapproval of the buildings around the pallid park where she could not reach her. For 2-3 clean breaths it no longer mattered that the whole wide world really belongs to images projected on a screen, to gently groomed goddesses in their steel and glass towers, that it belonged, in short, always to someone else. So she raised her eyes, and there above her was the saucer. It was beautiful. It was golden, with a dusty finish like that of an unripe Concord grape. It made a faint sound, a chord composed of 2 tones and a blunted hiss like the wind in tall wheat. It was darting about like a swallow, soaring and dropping. It circled and dropped and hovered like a fish shimmering. It was like all these living things, but with that beauty it had all the loveliness of things turned and burnished, measured, machined, and metrical. At first she felt no astonishment, for this was so different from anything she had ever seen before that it had to be a trick of the eye, a false evaluation of size and speed and distance that in a moment would resolve itself into a sun flash on an airplane, or the lingering glare of a welding arc. She looked away from it and abruptly realized that many other people saw it, saw something, too. People all around her had stopped moving and speaking and were craning upward. Around her was a glove of silent astonishment, and outside it she was aware of the life noise of the city, the hard-breathing giant who never inhales. She looked up again, and at last began to realize how large and how far away the saucer was. No, rather how small and how very near it was. It was just the size of the largest circle she might make with her 2 hands, and it floated not quite 18 inches over her head. Fear came then. She drew back and raised a forearm, but the saucer simply hung there. She bent far sideways, twisted away, leaped forward, looked back and upward to see if she had escaped it. At first she couldn't see it. Then she looked up, and there it was, close and gleaming, quivering and crooning right over her head. She bit her tongue. From the corner of her eye she saw a man cross himself. He did that because he saw me standing there with a halo over my head, she thought. And that was the greatest single thing that ever happened to her. No one had ever looked at her and made a respectful gesture before. Not once, not ever. Through terror, through panic and wonderment... It's Lorian. Hang on a second, I gotta answer a call. So, hey, I'm actually on the radio. Yeah, hey Jason, are you gonna go with her? No. We're actually on the radio till noon. I forgot about my show. So, no, we'll just meet. Well, unless you want to go, then. Well, and I have to shower and stuff, so I'll just meet you there.
Yeah, we'll take the shuttle.
Yeah. Okay, great. Alright, bye. Okay. That was Lorian Fenton calling. Just communicating about meeting at the Temple of Light. Where at the Temple of Light we might see these saucers that I'm reading about. So where was I? The terror was uppermost now. Oh, by the way, this is Worfpoe's Sunday Story Hour. I'm reading A Saucer of Loneliness by Theodore Sturgeon. So I will continue. The terror was uppermost now, however. She backed away, staring upward, stepping a ludicrous cakewalk. She should have collided with people. There were plenty of people there, gaping and craning, but she reached none. She spun around and discovered to her horror that she was the center of a pointing, pressing crowd. Its mosaic of eyes all budged, and its inner circle braced its many legs to press back and away from her. The saucer's gentle note deepened. It tilted, dropped an inch or so. Someone screamed, and the crowd broke away from her in all directions, milled about, and settled again in a new dynamic balance, a much larger ring as more and more people raced to thicken it against the efforts of the inner circle to escape. The saucer hummed and tilted, tilted. She opened her mouth to scream, fell to her knees, and the saucer struck. It dropped against her forehead and clung there. It seemed almost to lift her. She came erect on her knees, made an effort to raise her hands against it, and then her arms stiffened down and back, her hands not reaching the ground. For perhaps a second and a half, the saucer held her rigid, and then it passed a single ecstatic quiver to her body and dropped it. She plumped to the ground, the backs of her thighs heavy and painful on her heels and ankles. The saucer dropped beside her, rolled once in a small circle, once just around its edge, and lay still. It lay still and dull and metallic, different and dead. Hazily, she lay and gazed at the gray shrouded blue of the good spring sky, and hazily she heard whistles and some tardy screams, and a great stupid voice bellowing, "Give her air!" which made everyone press closer. Then there wasn't so much sky, because the blue-clad bulk with its metal buttons and its leatherette notebook. Okay, what's happening here? Stand back, for God's sakes!" And the widening ripples of observation, interpretation, and comment. "It knocked her down." "Some guy knocked her down." "He knocked her down." "Some guy knocked her down, and right in the broad daylight, this guy." "The park's getting to be," onward and outward, the adulteration of fact until it was lost altogether, because excitement is so much more important. Somebody with a harder shoulder than the rest, bullying close, a notebook here too, a witnessing eye over it, ready to change. A beautiful brunette to an attractive brunette for the afternoon editions, because attractive is as dowdy as any woman is allowed to get if she is a victim in the news. The glittering shield and florid face bending close. "You hurt bad, sister?" And then the echoes, back and back through the crowd. Hurt bad, badly injured. He beat the hell out of her, broad daylight." And still another man, slim and purposeful, tan gabardine, cleft chin, and beard shadow. "Flying saucer, huh? Okay, officer, I'll take over here." "And who the hell ain't you be taking over?" The flash of a brown leather wallet, a face so close behind that its chin was pressed into the gabardine shoulder. The face said, odd, "FBI," and that rippled outward too. The policeman nodded. The entire policeman nodded in one single bobbling genuflection. "Give me some help and clear this area," said the gabardine. "Yes, sir," said the policeman. FBI, the crowd murmured, and there was more sky to look at above her. She sat up, and there was glory in her face. "The saucer talked to me," she sang. "You shut up," said the gabardine. "You'll have lots of chances to talk later." "Yeah, sister," said the policeman. "My God, this mob could be full of communists." "You shut up too," said the gabardine. Someone in the crowd told someone else a communist beat up this girl, while someone else was saying she got beat up because she was a communist. She started to rise, but solicitous hands forced her down again. There were 30 police there by that time. I can walk," she said. "Now you just take it easy," they told her. They put a stretcher down beside her and lifted her onto it and covered her with a big blanket. "I can walk," she said as they carried her through the crowd. A woman went white and turned away, moaning, "Oh my God, how awful!" A small man with round eyes stared and stared at her and licked his lips. An ambulance. They slid her in. The gabardine was already there. A white-coated man with very clean hands. "How did this happen, miss?" "No questions," said the gabardine. "Security." The hospital. She said, "I gotta get back to work." "Take your clothes off," they told her. She had a bedroom to herself, then, for the first time in her life. Whenever the door opened, she could see a policeman outside. It opened very often to admit the kind of civilians who were very polite to military people, and the kind of military people who were even more polite to certain civilians. She did not know what they all did, nor what they wanted. Every single day they asked her 4,500,000 questions. Apparently they never talked to each other, because each of them asked her the same questions over and over. "What is your name?" "How old are you?" "What year were you born?" "What is your name?" Sometimes they would push her down strange paths with their strange questions. "Now your uncle married a woman from Middle Europe, did he? Where is Middle Europe? What clubs or fraternal organizations do you belong to? Ah, now, about that Rinker-Dinks gang on 63rd Street, who was really behind it?" But over and over again, "What did you mean when you said the saucer talked to you?" And she would say, "It talked to me." And they would say, "And it said?" And she would shake her head. There would be a lot of shouting ones, and then a lot of kind ones. No one had ever been so kind to her before. But she soon learned that no one was being kind to her. They were just getting her to relax, to think of other things so they could suddenly shoot that question at her. "What do you mean, it talked to you?" Pretty soon it was just like Mom's or school or any place, and she used to sit with her mouth closed and let them yell. Once again they sat her on a hard chair for hours and hours with a light in her eyes and let her get thirsty. Home, there was a transom over the bedroom door, and Mom used to leave the kitchen light glaring through it all night, every night, so she wouldn't get to the horrors. So the light didn't bother her at all. They took her out of the hospital and put her in jail. Some ways it was good. The food, the bed was all right too. Through the window she could see lots of women exercising in the yard. It was explained to her that they all had much harder beds. "You are very important, young lady, you know." That was nice at first, but as usual, it turned out they didn't mean her at all. They kept working on her. Once they brought the saucer into her. It was inside a big wooden crate with a padlock, and a steel box inside that with a Yale lock. It only weighed a couple of pounds, this saucer, but by the time they got it packed, it took 2 men to carry it and 4 men with guns to watch them. They made her act out the whole thing just the way it happened, with some soldiers holding the saucer over her head. It wasn't the same. They had cut a lot of shapes and pieces out of the saucer, and besides it was that dead gray color. They asked her if she knew anything about that, and for once she told them. "It's empty now," she said. The only one she would ever talk to was a little man with a fat belly who said to her the first time he was alone with her, "Listen, I think the way they've been treating you stinks. Now, get this. I got a job to do. My job is to find out why you won't tell what the saucer said. I don't want to know what it said, and I'll never ask you. I don't even want you to tell me. Let's just find out why you're keeping it a secret." Find out why she turned out to be hours of just talking about having pneumonia and the flower pot she made in 2nd grade that Mom threw down the fire escape, and getting left back in the school, and the dream about holding a wine glass in both hands and peeping over it at some man. And one day she told him why she wouldn't say about the saucer, just the way it came to her. "Because it was talking to me, and it's nobody else's business," she said. She even told him about the man crossing himself that day. It was the only other thing she had of her own. He was nice. He was the one who warned her about the trial. "I have no business saying this, but they're going to give you a full dress treatment, judge and jury and all. You just say what you want to say, no less and no more here, and don't let 'em get your goat. You have a right to own something." He got up and swore and left. First a man came and talked to her for a long time about how maybe the earth would be attracted attacked from outer space by beings much stronger and cleverer than we were, and maybe she had the key to a defense. So she owned it to the whole world. And then even if Earth wasn't attacked, just think of what an advantage she might give this country over its enemies. Then he shook his finger in her face and said that what she was doing amounted to working for the enemies of her country, and he turned out to be the man defending her at the trial. The jury found her guilty of contempt of court, and the judge recited a long list of penalties he could give her. He gave her one of them and suspended it. They put her back in jail for a few more days, and one fine day, they turned her loose. That was wonderful at first. She got a job at a restaurant and a furnished room. She had been in the papers so much that Mom didn't want her back home. Mom was drunk most of the time and sometimes used to tear up the whole neighborhood, but all the same she had very special ideas about being respectable, and being in the papers all that time for spying was not her idea of being decent. So she put her maiden name on the mailbox downstairs and told her daughter not to live there anymore. At the restaurant she met a man who asked her for a date the first time. She spent every cent she had on a red handbag to go with her red shoes. They weren't the same shade, but anyway, they were both red. They went to the movies, and afterward he didn't try to kiss her or anything. He just tried to find out what the flying saucer told her. She didn't say anything. She went home and cried all night. Then some men sat in a booth talking, and they shut up and glared at her every time she came past. They spoke to her boss, and he came and told her that they were electronics engineers working for the government, and they were afraid to talk shop while she was around. Wasn't she some sort of spy or something? So she got fired. Once she saw her name on the jukebox. She put in a nickel and punched the number, and the record was all about the flying saucer came down one day and taught her a brand new way to play, and what it was said I will not say, but she shook me out of this world. And while she was listening to it, someone in the juke joint recognized her and called her by name. 4 of them followed her home, and she had to block the door shut. Oh. Sometimes she'd be all right for months on end, and then someone would ask for a date. 3 times out of 5, she and the date were followed. Once the man she was with arrested the man who was tailing them. Twice the man who was tailing them arrested the man she was with. 5 times out of 5, the date would try to find out about the saucer. Sometimes she would go out with someone and pretend it was a real date, but she wasn't very good at it. So she moved to the shore and got a job cleaning at night in offices and stores. There weren't many to clean, but that just meant there weren't many people to remember her face from the papers. Like clockwork, every 18 months some feature writer would drag it all out again in a magazine or a Sunday supplement, and every time anyone saw the headlight on a mountain or a light on the weather balloon, it had to be a flying saucer, and there had to be some tired quip about the saucer wanting to tell secrets. Then for 2 or 3 weeks she'd stay off the streets in the daytime. Once she thought she had it whipped. People didn't want her, so she began reading. The novels were all right for a while, until she found out that most of them were like the movies, all about the pretty ones who really own the world. So she learned things. Animals, trees, a lousy little chipmunk caught in a wire fence would hit her. The animals didn't want her. The trees didn't care. Then she hit on the idea of the bottles. She got all the bottles she could and wrote on papers which she corked into the bottles. She tramped miles up and down the beaches and threw the bottles out as far as she could. She knew that if the right person found one, it would give that person the only thing in the world that would help her. Those bottles kept her going for 3 solid years. Everyone's got to have a little secret, a little something he does. And at last the time came when it was no use anymore. You can go on trying to help someone who maybe exists, but soon you can't pretend there's such a person anymore, and that's it. The end. "Are you cold?" I asked when she was through telling me this. The surf was quieter and the shadows longer. "No," she answered from the shadows. Suddenly she said, "Do you think I was mad at you because you saw me without any clothes?" "Well, why wouldn't you be?" I asked. "You know, I don't care. I wouldn't have wanted you to see me in a ball gown or overalls. You can't cover up my carcass. It shows. It's there, whatever. I just didn't want you to see me at all." "Me or anyone?" She hesitated. "You." I got up and stretched and walked a little, thinking, didn't the FBI try to stop you throwing those bottles? "Oh, sure. They spent I don't know how much taxpayers' money gathering them up. They still make a spot check every once in a while. They're getting tired of it, though. All the writing in the bottles is the same." She laughed. I didn't know she could laugh. "What's funny?" she asked. "What's funny?" I asked. "All of them," she said. "Judges, jailers, jukeboxes, people. Do you know it wouldn't have saved me a minute's trouble if I'd told them the whole thing at the very beginning?" "No?" "No! They wouldn't have believed me. What they wanted was a new weapon, super science from a super race, to slap the hell out of this super race if they ever got a chance, or out of all the own that they don't. All those brains," she breathed, with more wonder than scorn. "All that brass. They think super race, and it comes out super science. Don't they ever imagine a super race has super feelings too? Super laughter, maybe, or super hunger?" She paused. "Isn't it time you asked me what the saucer said?" "Well, I'll tell you," I blurted. "There is in certain living souls a quality of loneliness unspeakable, so great it must be shared as company is shared by lesser beings. Such a loneliness is mine, so know by this that in immensity there is one lonelier than you." "Dear Jesus," she said devoutly, and began to weep. "And how is it addressed?" "To the loneliest one." "How did you know?" she whispered. "It's what you put in the bottles, isn't it?" "Yes," she said. "Whenever it gets to be too much, that no one cares, that no one ever did, you throw a bottle into the sea and it goes out, a part of your loneliness. You sit and think of someone finding it, learning for the first time that the worst there is can be understood." The moon was setting and the surf was hushed. We looked up and out the stars. She said, "We don't know what loneliness is like. People thought the saucer was a saucer, but it wasn't. It was a bottle with a message inside. It had a bigger ocean to cross, all of space, and not much chance of finding anybody. Loneliness? We don't know loneliness." When I could, I asked her why she had tried to kill herself. "I've had it good," she said. "With what the saucer told me, I wanted to pay back. I was bad enough to be helped. I had to know I was good enough to help. No one wants me? Fine. But don't tell me that no one anywhere wants my help. I can't stand that." I took a deep breath. "I found one of your bottles 2 years ago. I've been looking for you ever since. Tide charts, current tables, maps, and wandering. I heard some talk about you and the bottles hereabouts. Someone told me you'd quit doing it. You'd taken to wandering the dunes at night. I knew why. I ran all the way." I needed another breath now. "I got a clubfoot. I think right, but the words don't come out of my mouth the way they're inside my head. I have this nose. I never had a woman. Nobody ever wanted to hire me to work where they'd have to look at me." "You're beautiful," I said. "You're beautiful." She said nothing, and it was as if a light came from her, more light and far less shadow than ever the practiced moon could cast. Among the many things it meant was that even to loneliness there is an end, for those who are lonely enough, long enough. The end. And that was A Saucer of Loneliness by Theodore Sturgeon, published, I believe, in 1955 in Galaxy magazine. Let me see, it doesn't say here. I could be wrong. But It was from the 50s at some point in some pulp magazine. Theodore Sturgeon. And that story was the Outer Limits, or the Twilight Zone, the ones from the 80s. Made an episode out of it that I didn't think really caught the essence of the story, which is, so I guess Jason's been illustrating the story in the video room, and you could see me in the background. I need to wet my Vissel as where's my Vissel wetter? Oh.
This was the flying saucer.
Oh, this was the saucer. Okay, this was the saucer of secrets, or loneliness. Saucer of Secrets is a Pink Floyd song. What time is it? Well, we were looking at Nighthawk in his studio. He's not on anymore. So, keeping with the saucer theme, I have a story in my book, Pictures of Houses with Water Damage, that you could see in the video room there. Jason's holding it up. I have a flying saucer alien sort of story. I haven't read it in years. It's called, oh, I need to find it. It's called Solid Memories Have the Lifespan of Tulips and Sunflowers. Yeah, it's a kind of elongated tale, or title. It was originally published in an anthology called Prom Date, which was an anthology of science fiction and fantasy stories set during the prom, high school prom. So I wrote a story for it a long time ago. Anthology came out in 1999. Probably find it on Amazon for 99 cents. The way the lighting sucks here. Hang on. There we go. Okay, back to the saucer stories. Solid Memories Have the Lifespan of Tulips and Sunflowers by yours truly, Worfpoe. I thought I saw a glowing disc in the sky driving home. Actually, I did. I saw it. I stopped the car and got out and looked at it. Other people also stopped their cars. Then it took off into the sky. I drove home a bit numb, not because of the sighting, but the memory it brought back. My girlfriend Anne was home. She didn't look happy. I told her about the disc. I met someone, she said. I see, I said. I could be in love, she said. I understand, I said. We discussed this before, right? Am I right, she said. We discussed this. If either of us had ever had an affair with someone else, we'd talk about it, right? I should have mentioned it sooner, I know. I didn't think it meant anything at first, but now it's becoming something. What's his name, I asked. Oh, you don't know him. His name is Bill. Bill, I said. A solid name. I said I saw something. You're not bothered? Only by my memories, I said. Sometimes I wonder how accurate they are. She had an incredulous look on her face. I could be leaving you. I know. David, she said. Yes? If we'd gotten married, she said, and said no more. I'd skipped my 10-year high school reunion. My folks had passed along the information, the invitation, the request for a small bio from me. I wrote back, David Hawthorne is alive and well. I couldn't go. I hadn't become everything I'd set out to be. In fact, I'd become nothing. I was unemployed. My acting career was going nowhere. 3 failed sitcoms, a lot of bad plays, never the roles I really wanted, the roles I knew I could do. I didn't want to see people I once knew. I didn't want to see my former best friend Mark, or my former girlfriend Ginny, or the girl I really loved, Helen. If she was still on this planet. Helen? I was trying to remember the senior prom and what really happened. It hadn't actually come to mind until I saw the UFO, you see. The night of the prom, I had seen a UFO, I think. And I think I saw Helen board the ship, telling me her real place was with her people. Or was this a dream? Prom night 13 years ago, and I can only recall patches. The rented tux, Jenny's dress, the limo, the hillside party, the drinking, Helen's green dress, Jenny's pregnant belly. I've had dreams over the years that I was having sex with Helen. I'd had dreams that I was reunited with Jenny and we were having sex as well. Sometimes I think about these dreams and wonder if they were not dreams, if they were really misplaced moments in my life that I've conveniently discarded. I went to see Craig, a psychotherapist friend of mine. Hypnotize you, Craig said. Yeah, I said, that's what I want you to do. I'm not sure if it'd be a good idea, he said. This is just between you and me. I'm not a patient. I'm your friend. Yeah, well, that's the problem. You'll get from being my friend to being my patient. I have to know, I said. What, if you saw a UFO 13 years ago? I saw one 3 nights ago, I said. I may have seen one 13 years ago. Did you see aliens, he asked. No, I said. I have a number of patients who claim to be abductees, Craig said. I wasn't abducted, I said. And do you think about these other patients of yours? Are they crazy? Well, something's going on, Craig said. Okay, look, we'll set a time for next week. Until then, I want you to concentrate on your memories. We may not have to use hypnosis. If we do, we do. But for the next week, just think about it. Think back. Focus on details. Try to map out the night in question. Anything and everything you can recall. From the moment you woke up till the moment the night ended. I tried, and I was afraid. I was alone trying, and I was afraid. I'd come home, and Anne wouldn't be there. Some nights she'd be home, some nights she wasn't. She was with that person she talked about, Bill. Bill, the solid name. What had I done wrong? All my life, what had I done wrong? This was why I didn't like to dwell on the past. I always rediscovered my blunders and overanalyzed them. I was going with Ginny my last 2 years in high school. I had chased her. She wasn't interested at first. Then something happened. Then we were boyfriend and girlfriend. I didn't know what I was doing. She didn't know what she was doing. We were making it up as we went along. We were kids. We were in love. I think we were in love. Yes, we were in love, and as kids like us could be in love. But I wanted more. I didn't know what more was. There was something missing. I think she felt it. We lost our virginity together. She had a horrible mother, a tyrant of a mother, like one of those wicked witch anti-mothers from the children's fantasies, the bad antagonist you must do battle with and overcome. Ginny and I certainly did battle with her. Her mother, who we called the monster, hated me. She thought I was a bad choice of a boyfriend, and maybe I was. My parents were no one special. I didn't have a job or a car, and my only interest in the future was acting. I wanted to be a famous actor. The mother often hit Ginny in the face. Hit her back, I suggested once. She would murder me, Ginny said. Like kill you? Once, there was this news item on TV, Ginny said, about a woman who stabbed her son to death. So the monster said, I bet he drove her to it. 2 or 3 times a week, the monster would ask questions like, Did you screw him yet? And, You pregnant yet? Ginny answered in the negative. Sex was our secret. Sex was a secret in high school, as well as fuel for gossip. Who's having sex with who? Which teachers have had sex with their students? What wild thing happened one drunken night? The first item of gossip I had heard about Helen was that she was drinking tequila in a car with 2 boys at the movies, and she performed various sexual acts with both of them. When I looked at Helen, I couldn't believe this tale of debauched drunkenness. Helen was quiet and demure, with pale skin and pale blonde hair and gold-rimmed glasses. She dressed in skirt suits and fine dresses, and held herself, when she sat and when she walked, like royalty. It was halfway through senior year that I was convinced I was in love with Helen, and I didn't even really know her. She sat near me in my Spanish and political history classes, and sometimes we talked, her soft, bird-like voice. I started to have dreams about her, which translated into daytime fantasies. The worst of it all was that I spent my time then with Ginny when I really wished to be with Helen. And then Ginny got pregnant, and I really wanted to be with Helen. I escaped into my fantasies with Helen. Perhaps I just wanted to escape. When Ginny told me she knew she was pregnant, I went, oh, 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 I don't know. I didn't want to think about it. We didn't talk about it. We went on like it wasn't true. But it was there, her sickness, her body changes. She was 6 weeks gone. I was hoping it would go away. I thought about Helen a lot more. I created worlds of the future for us. She came to me in my dreams. She said in my dreams, Helen said, "Open your eyes, David." "They're open," I replied. "They are." I didn't want to go to the senior prom, which to me was scenes of horror and destruction in that movie Carrie. You know, Sissy Spacek, the meek telekinetic, thought she was the sad little girl whose dreams had all come true, only to find out it was all a practical joke. So what does she do? She kills everyone. I had a fantasy of Ginny getting those powers and doing to the monster what Carrie did to her evil mother in the movie. Ginny wanted to go to the prom, and my mother wanted us to go. My mother took me to be fitted for the tux rental. I thought I looked rather well in it, standing before the mirror, turning sideways, then spinning forward, my hand out like a gun, the James Bond theme running through my mind, dun 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 dun, and the way impressionable young men dream of being heroes and spies. My mother even rented a dress for Ginny because the monster certainly wasn't going to lift a finger for this event. I don't know what my mother was thinking about Ginny and me. Did she think we were going to get married? What would my mother say if she knew Ginny was pregnant? The whole time I kept thinking these things, especially when she took me to get my finger fitted for a class ring. What would my mother say if she knew she was going to be a grandmother? Perhaps she wouldn't be happy. Wouldn't have been happy. I wasn't happy. I was 17 and scared as hell. Anne came home. "Hello," I said. "Hi," she said. She wouldn't look at me. "Home tonight?" I asked. "You want dinner?" she said. I was thinking of making dinner. I joined her in the kitchen. She was starting to make spaghetti. "I want a quiet night," she said. Something was wrong. I could tell by her voice. "What?" I said. "Don't ask me about Bill," she said. I won't. I wasn't going to." "Oh," she said. "Well, how have you been?" "Did you go to your senior prom?" I asked her. "What?" "Prom," I said. "Well, of course," she said, thinking. "Of course." She stirred the noodles. "Who'd you go with?" I asked. "Hank," she said. "Another solid name," I said. "Please," she said. "Meat sauce tonight?" I asked. "All we have is marinara." "Did you love Hank?" I asked. No, she said. "He was a jock. Football. You know, someone to go with. He asked me. I said yes. He was a good lay, too. Now that I think about it, a good, hard F." "So wait," Anne said, as we ate dinner. "You were with Ginny, but you didn't want to be with Ginny." "No. You wanted this Helen." "I think so. You said you loved Ginny." "Well, I loved her," I said. "Yes, I loved her very much." "But you loved Helen." "No." "You were afraid," Anne said. "Ginny was knocked up. You couldn't deal with it, so you had your eyes on Helen." "That's what I've been saying," I said. "Jeez," Anne said, drinking red wine. "It was a crappy thing, I know," I said. "You were a kid," she said. And it was still crappy. "So what happened to Ginny?" Anne asked. "She's married as far as I know," I said. 2 kids. She became a born-again Christian." God, I hate that when it happens. "So what about Helen?" "I don't know." "Wait, Ginny has 2 kids?" "Last I heard." "One isn't yours?" "No," I said. I realized that for all the time Anne and I had lived together, she didn't know me. I didn't know her. We'd never really talked about our past like this. Well, what happened to your kid? She asked. She was pregnant. Well, I said, we didn't have it. Just relax, Craig said. I'm relaxed, I said. I was sitting in a deep, plush, comfortable armchair in his office. He stared at it with his abysmal blue eyes. Just relax, he said, and listen to my voice. I didn't know how he did it. I don't want to know. But I went under as he held the crystal ball in front of my eyes. It's a funny thing. First you think, I'm not really hypnotized. I'm not aware of anything. I'm aware of everything. Then you realize something is different. You have total access to the past, and it's happening right before you. You're going through the motions like you're back there again. You're that age. You could feel it. You could smell it. Senior prom 13 years ago, Craig said. Ginny and I are at the living room of my parents' house, I said. My mother is excited. She's taking all kinds of pictures. I'm in my James Bond penguin suit, and Ginny is in her dress. I keep looking at her stomach. I keep thinking about the life that's growing in there. I'm afraid. How the hell will I tell my parents? Will they understand? They'll understand, of course, it happens, but I'll have responsibilities. I'm not ready for this. I don't want this. Focus on Ginny's face, Craig said. She's glowing. She's smiling. What happens next? While no one's looking, my father shakes my hand and says, have fun, kid. He has slipped a $100 bill into my hand. I'm surprised. He was against renting the limo. He'd been drinking, I see. I want to be drunk. I'll get drunk later on. I know. Let's move to the prom itself, Craig said. A hotel ballroom near the beach. It was a nice feeling, arriving in a limo when few couples here had a limo. There was food, and Ginny and I had food. There was dancing, and Ginny and I danced. There was a photographer taking photos of all the couples, and Ginny and I stood in line and we got our photos taken. She was sitting in a chair, me standing beside her, one arm around her shoulder, one hand taking her hand. I saw Helen. She'd come stag, apparently, with several other girls. How could she not have a date? I wondered. She was exquisite in her green dress, black gloves that came to her elbows. She wasn't wearing her glasses, and her blonde hair was bunched up, strands falling over her forehead and eyes. I think Ginny saw me looking at her. She cleared her throat. I forced myself not to look at Helen. Something felt empty in me. Something felt wrong. I was in the wrong universe. This wasn't the way things were supposed to happen. I wasn't intended to graduate high school and go straight into fatherhood, maybe even marriage. I looked at Ginny, and for a brief moment I felt resentment. I wanted to say something to her, but tonight was certainly not the night. I was scared. Ginny and I danced a slow dance. We returned to our table. I was trying to be sly, my eyes seeking out Helen. She danced with a few guys, but mostly remained with her friends. Mark joined us. Mark was my best friend. He was a tall, overweight guy who was into a lot of the things I was, acting, literature, rock music. We had a good connection. We had spent many nights driving around in his car looking for adventures that never came to us. Mark had also come stag with a couple other guys. Mark tried to get dates, but it never happened. His tux didn't quite fit him either. Mark was full of talk, and he was talking to Ginny, which distracted her enough for me to watch Helen's movements. What the hell was I doing? This was the senior prom. I wasn't supposed to be having fun. I was supposed to be having fun. Mind if I dance with your date? Mark said to me, the usual hint of sarcasm in his voice. Not at all, sir, said I. So Ginny danced with Mark. It was a funny sight. Ginny was 5'2" and Mark was 6'3". Helen was looking at me. She had a drink in her hand and she was looking my way. I didn't know what to do. She waved. I waved back. Then I looked away. What the hell was I doing? I should have went over there. I should have asked her to dance. Helen was in 2 of my classes, right? She sat next to me, right? So Jenny would understand. Jenny and Mark returned. Dance with me, Jenny said. Yes, I said, standing up. Me and my big clumsy feet, Mark said. I used the $100 bill to get a motel room. Jenny and I had gotten a motel room a few times. It was an exciting teenage thing to do. We drove around in the limo until our time was up. Oh, you're the quietest couple I've had in a while, the limo driver said. Usually proms are pretty wild. I tipped him $20 at the motel. We are quiet, Jenny said when we went into our room. We're getting old, I said. This is scary. We undressed and got into bed. Senior prom, Jenny said. Do you want to make love? My hand was on her slightly protruding belly. I don't know. I'm not in the mood, she said, but I will if you want to. I'm not in the mood, I said. Okay. Oh, God, I said. Oh, God is right, she said. We're talking like some kind of old married couple, I said. We're comfortable, she said, hugging me. There were knocks on the door. Mark, Jenny said. Probably, I said. I got dressed and let Mark in. Jenny pulled the covers to her chin. Old man, Mark said, like he was reading my mind. I come to whisk you away for an adventure, the both of you. Now adventure's for me, Jenny said. Sleep is for me. I looked at Jenny. Go ahead, she told me. Her eyes said it was all right. I did need to get away from this scene. Mark and I left and got into his car. There was plenty of booze on the floor. I picked up a bottle of old Jim Beam and took a good swig. You're getting boring, Mark said. The hell with you. Where are we going? Everyone's headed to Presidio Park. And that's where we're off to, I asked. You bet, Mark said, revving the engine of his car. It's the end of our lives tonight. Hey, do you think I might get laid up there? Presidio Park is on the top of this small mountain, I said under hypnosis. It's basically the big party hangout. People gather and party until the cops come and tell them to leave. The cops aren't going to come tonight, not on this special night. Even cops have hearts sometimes. So Mark and I are there drinking, and there's all these kids from the school, and from the other schools too. There's a lot of loud music. It is here that I saw the UFO. Do you see it now? Craig asked. Not now, no. I see Helen. I'm stunned. She's still in her green dress and these gloves. She's alone, drinking a beer. I know this is my one and only chance. I can't blow it. I grab a bottle of tequila from Mark's car and tell him I have to meet my destiny. Can you believe that? I actually said that. Destiny! But I'm already drunk. Ah, fine, Mark says. Just leave me all alone. Bitch, I say to him. Double bitch, he says to me. So tell me about the sky, Craig said. It's a very clear night, and a lot of stars out. Tell me about Helen. God, she's gorgeous. She sees me coming her way, and she smiles. Her teeth are perfect and white. Hey there, Helen said. Hello. I wanted to tell her she was the most perfect girl in the world. I wanted to tell her she was the invader of my dreams. Hi, I said. Nice tequila bottle, she said. Yes, I said. Yes, it is. I took a drink. She was just looking at me. Would you like some, I asked. Sure. She tossed her beer away, took the bottle, and took a good long swig of tequila. So, I said, looking at all the people there. Where's Jenny, she asked. Oh, not here. Oh, she's not. It's okay. What? We looked at one another. What the hell was going on here? I know this spot, she said. Do you want to go? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I did. She takes my hand, I said to Craig. My hand is in her small hand, and we're leaving the general party area. She seems to know where she's going. She knows this place well. I've only been up here a few times, and she's been up here many times. She's gotten laid up here. I know. She's drank and smoked pot and maybe even had sex with a few guys. Then she says something to me, which scares me, like she's reading my mind. She says, yes, I've been up here many times. We're on the other side of the park, alone, and it is dark, and we can see almost all of the city, at least this part of the city, on this side. Helen and I sat under a tree, and we drank from the tequila bottle. It's nice here, I said to her. Put your arm around me, Helen said. I did. She leaned into me. That's nice. Yeah, I said. I know, she said. I've seen it in your eyes. I've seen you looking at me. What? I know, she said, and kissed me. I was nervous. Are you okay, she asked. Yeah, I said. I'm being abrupt, she said. I kissed her. It was a long kiss. She stopped me. I know what you want, David, she said. You think I'm bad, I said. Here I am with you, here, and I have a girlfriend, and she's pregnant, Helen said. What? She smiled. Come on. How'd you know? Girls know, she laughed. And I'm psychic. Oh, I said. We were silent, and both took drinks from the bottle. I've seen her sick in the bathroom, Helen said. I've seen her eating crackers. It's so obvious. Oh, I said, and drank. You're not ready, she said. No. It sucks. Yeah, it does. I like you, she said. You should have been my prom date, I said suddenly. No, she said. No, and she said, you don't know. You don't love me. I do love you, I said. No! You've been in my dreams, I said. I know, she said, because you keep thinking about me, and I feel your thoughts, so I go into your dreams. We drank. I laughed. What are you, a witch? You're getting drunk, she said. You're not, I said. Not yet. Get drunk with me, I said. I will. And, I said. You want to screw me, Helen said. That's all you really want. And, Craig said. I was silent, which prompted him. We're kissing, I said. Man, are we kissing. Her lipstick is all over me and her perfume. I'm grabbing at her boobs and she's rubbing me between the legs, and I try to unzip her dress from the back. Then something funny happens. Helen pushes me away. She has this weird look on her face. I ask her what's wrong, and she says, there's so much that you don't understand. She doesn't seem drunk anymore. She says, look up in the sky. I look, and I see it. My God, I see it. The UFO? Yes, it's right there, hovering near us. Well, not at first. At first it's just this glowing dot in the sky moving strangely. Then it gets bigger, coming toward me. Then it's there, and it's huge, disc-shaped, flying saucer, but really just a lot of glowing light. I look at Helen, and she's smiling. I have to go, she says. Do you want to go with me? The light is intense. It's too intense. It hurts my eyes. I scream, and I'm scared. No, this isn't what I want. I screamed. David, Craig said, you're coming out of the memory on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. He clapped his hands. I caught my breath. Crap! Crap, Anne said. You're BSing me. No, I said, I remember now. So there's this UFO there, and she what? Yeah, I say. And she tells me I have to go home now. I have to return to my people. And I'm like, what? And Helen goes, I was hoping we'd have a moment, but my people are calling me back. And the next thing I know, she's standing under the ship, and this beam of light comes out, engulfing her, and she disappears. And then I watched the UFO fly away. And? I don't know, I said. I remember walking back to the party. The cops were there, dispersing people. Mark grabbed me and said, let's go. In the car, he said, where the hell did you take off to? And I said, I don't know. And I really didn't. I was in a daze. Mark thought I was drunk off my butt. And Ginny was in the motel room. Yeah. Ginny wasn't in bed. The bathroom door was closed, and I heard her crying. The door was locked. Ginny, I said. Go away, she said. Let me in, I said. No, she said, crying. Let me in! She opened the door. She was a mess. She pointed to the toilet. There was blood everywhere. It's gone, she said. Anne and I washed the dinner dishes together. She had a miscarriage, Anne said. Yeah, I said. How'd you feel? I don't know. Remorse, in a way. It was our baby. But also relief. I wasn't going to be a father. I didn't have to tell my parents anything. Responsibility was gone. I was free. I looked into Ginny's eyes and I saw the same. But I also saw a mother who'd lost a child, and I think I aged 5 years in that single moment. No, you were too young. You weren't ready. Neither of you. Think of what your life and her life would be like right now. Sometimes I think about it, I said. So what happens next in the story, she asked. What happens next, I said, my hands covered in soap suds. We still lived a secret life. We couldn't tell anyone, and I called an ambulance to take her to the hospital. They cleaned her out. Prom night was over. She started to go to church. A few weeks later, she said God was telling us something. She became born again. She wanted me to join. I wasn't into Jesus and sin, so we broke up, I guess. She met a guy in church, and he got her pregnant, and they got married, and I went to state college. And Helen? I never saw her talk to her again. She went back to her planet, Anne laughed. Yeah, sure, I said. Sorry. Anne and I went into the bedroom. We undressed and got into bed. Senior prom, Anne said. I went with a jock whose only interest was to shove himself in me. Do you want to make love? My hand was on her. I don't know. I'm not in the mood, she said, but I will if you want to. I'm not in the mood, I said. Okay. Oh, God, I said and laughed. Oh, God is right, she said. We're talking like some old married couple, I said. We're comfortable, she said, hugging me. Well, we made love anyway. What about, I started to say? What, she said. Nothing. Tell me. No. Tell me. Solid bill, I said. There is no bill no more, she said softly. I drove up to Presidio Park the next night. It was midweek and there were a few high school kids drinking beer and hanging out. I parked my car and started walking to the place Helen took me to 13 years ago. I hadn't been up here since. I had a small bottle of tequila in my jacket. I found the tree Helen and I had sat under, and I sat. The tree looked the same, if memory served me well. Memory was my nemesis, this I knew, so I drank. I tried to think of Helen's kisses, her skin, the way she smelled, the way she felt. I knew those sensations during my hypnosis session, but I couldn't grasp them now. I could only think of the way Ginny felt, tasted, and smelled. I looked at the city. The sky was mostly clear. A few clouds, lots of stars, as always. I imagined one star coming alive and getting bigger and coming near me. It's a ship, and Helen gets out. Hello, old friend, she says, all dressed up in a silver spacesuit. I finished the bottle. None of it had ever happened, of course. I needed to get more in tune with my reality. Walking back to my car, I passed a young couple, heading for my tree. I smiled at them. The boy looked away, and the girl smiled back bashfully. I was just some old geek to them. I got into my car and drove home. From the sky, a flying, glowing disc appeared and hovered for a moment over my car and flew away. I got out and watched it. I went to the flower store. They were just about to close. I bought a bouquet of tulips and sunflowers. I hate roses. Ginny loved roses. I remember once seeing Helen walking to a class holding a sunflower someone had given her. Anne was watching TV when I got home. She was watching Star Trek. We're in the wrong universe, David, she said. These are yours, please, I said. She took the flowers, and she kissed me. The end. That was my story. Solid memories have the lifespan of tulips and sunflowers. I was reading it out of my collection of stories, pictures of houses with water damage. The story was originally published in an anthology of original fiction of prom date themed science fiction and fantasy stories called Prom Date. And whether or not any of that story is autobiographical, I cannot say. I will not say, but I will say maybe. Okay, so what time it is? Oh, I still got time.